You are listening to The Fortress. Welcome back to The Fortress, everybody. On this edition this week, we're going to talk about a couple of major themes that basically brought about the first three titles to my very first trilogy. Now, the first book I want to talk about is my very first book. It's called Misguided. And I wanted to use that theme, Misguided, to talk about how maybe one or two of us in our lifetime have been misguided by anger or vengeance or wanting to just get even, get some retribution for something that happened to us. That's what the first book is about. Now I wrote a blog post that was inspired by a movie I just saw. It's called Patriots Day. Now, I didn't want to bring up that movie tonight to talk about politics, but I thought the movie did an excellent job of showing how really, in those dark circumstances where, yes, our instinct is to want to get even, get revenge, and you even kind of see some of that play out in the movie as far as, when the police officers are really wanting to catch these guys that committed this heinous act. And my book follows a similar path there. The story of Misguided. I've got a special forces soldier, then he becomes a counter-terror expert, and ISIS kidnaps and does great harm to his wife and daughter. So he wants to get revenge. Now, I'm not going to tell you whether he actually gets his revenge or not, but other things happen in the story, just like other things happen in the Boston Marathon bombing. And that main thing was that love won. The good old Tsarnaev brothers from the Boston Marathon bombing, perhaps not many events have taken place that help demonstrate how love wins better than those despicable events brought about by those two cowards. I know that's something, a lot of people don't want to think about. A lot of people are like, Jason, why would you even talk about such a bad thing? And how does love win there? Well, let's break that down a little further. These two cowards are just one small example. But after the FBI did some homework on both of these guys, their hate for America was evident. And the hate they intended to carry out against Boston, it cost human lives and tragic loss of life and limb. Yet in the end, love won. Those bombs were left in the most crowded places, with metal shrapnel built in to spread out and inflict as much harm as possible. And yet, when the horrific incident occurred, instead of people just taking care of themselves, first responders and bystanders went towards the smoke, towards the carnage, and helped people who had somehow survived. The love of life defeated hate in an instant. And although there was a manhunt for the evil brothers later, the country reached out to Boston. Families in Boston clung to each other. And the city, so full of the tough Irish, mostly Irish background, Bostonians, they bounced back and still hosted the iconic race with resolve and a happy spirit. And victims of the race bombings, they overcame and even participated in the race a year later. And the phrase Boston Strong caught fire. And that verbiage was used in similar tragic events in other communities elsewhere in the country. But Boston and the act of hatred committed there is just one little example. I'm sure there are thousands of other examples we could all think of. that have occurred that nobody will know about. Let's say every time ISIS executes someone for being a Christian. I mean, how many of those have happened now? Yet, ISIS terrorists can hold a blade to someone's neck and yell in Arabic about how blessed their prophet is and how he's the only one they can listen to. And yet their heinous acts of execution still can't change the heart of a human being and the heart that that Christian has for God and their Savior, Jesus Christ. There is nothing an evil person can do to defeat love. Love wins. In the end, love wins. Yeah, so even if that person loses their life to the radicals, their love for God still overcame the hate and evil acted out against them. Love beats hate, and love beats evil, and love beats suffering every single time. People who suffer at the time may not even be able to see that for quite some time. But love triumphs over the bad things of this world because that is exactly how God meant for things to be. That's why Jesus will have the ultimate victory in the end, because God is love. You know, there was a shooting in my part of the country. All you guys out there in KDove land, you're listening to me. I'm in South Carolina. But in Townville, South Carolina, there was a school shooting. And it was brought about such a strong example of love in the community after the events. They borrowed the events from the verbiage and the words used in the Boston bombings, Boston Strong. That carried right on over into the events in Townville. And this little boy named Jacob. And it went from being Townville Strong with the way the community bonded together and prayed for Jacob and hoped that he would make it. And then it was Jacob Strong. Now, those of you out there who weren't aware of these events or didn't get to see, when this little boy Jacob, when they had his funeral, people dressed up as superheroes because that little boy loved superheroes. But you know who that little boy, who his parents said that little boy Jacob said was the biggest hero of all? Jesus. Little Jacob loved Jesus. Love was the winner, despite the tragic circumstance, despite the fact that was brought about by violence that ended poor Jacob's life. Love was still the winner. After the Boston Marathon bombings, communities came together, families came together. They had another marathon a year later. The community was stronger. Tragic events can happen. Yes, they're awful. But love still ends up being the winner. But you have to truly know what love is. If you truly know God, if you strive to know God better, you will truly find love. And if you can make that happen in your life, you can overcome anything. I don't care how bad or scary things seem to get. You can overcome it. So, hug your loved ones. If these elections, if this stuff going on in our current events, our current situation on the news and in politics, if you're that distraught and bothered by it, well, love's still going to win. Look at the book of Revelation. Jesus is going to come back, and he is going to defeat evil once and for all. So why would you not want to be on that winning team? I know I do. I'm wearing the right jersey. What about you? So chew on those words for a little while. Think about it. Pray about it. Read about it. I highly recommend the Bible. By all means, check out my books. My first book, Misguided. In the end, love wins. Just can't tell you how. You'd have to read it for yourself. We're going to go to a break. After we hear from a few words from our friends, we'll be right back. And when we get back, in our next segment, we'll talk about how maybe one or two of us have been mistaken in our lives. When we come back.
Hey, Bob, it's time to come on and do the clip. Come on. He'll be right here in just a second. We're waiting on Leroy Bob. I'm sorry, Bob Leroy. I'm Leroy. Waiting on Bob. We're going to tell you a little bit about this book. This book, Misguided, is pretty good. Hey, Bob, how you doing? Hey, man, sorry. I was trying to get the darn fish hook to stick in the bill of my hat right. Wasn't working right. Anyway, what's up, everybody? Me and old Leroy here. I'm Bob. This is Leroy. We go together like how's that old saying go? Like peas and carrots. That's it. That's an old Forrest Gump saying. Yeah, that's it. Well, anyway, Bob, we're here to tell them about that book. Get on with it. Oh, that's right. Sorry about that. I'm the one that lined all this up with Mr. Jason and everything. Anyway, you need to go check his book out. Just go to Amazon, search Jason Fort. If you search Jason Fort, first book he's got, it's called Misguided. There's also the edition Misguided, the Jesus Assassin. You can also find out everything you want to know about him at www.jason-e-fort.com. Everybody got that? Leroy, you want to add anything? Yes, as a matter of fact, I do. I just want to tell everybody out there, it's a pretty good book. It's got good messages. Just make sure you read it, all right? Well, that's it for me and Leroy. Heck, what's your name again? That's it from us, guys. I'll talk to you later. Y'all have a good one. God bless.
Once again, welcome back to the Fortress, everybody. I told you once we returned from our break, we'd get a little into my second book, Mistaken. Well, and we'd focus a little bit on that theme. I wanted the listeners out there, first of all, to think about all the times in your life where maybe you thought you were on the right track. You thought you had some things figured out. You thought everything was going fine. You're living the right way, you're doing the right things, and then all of a sudden, something happens and you find out you were wrong all along. Has that ever happened to you? I think it happens to a lot of people over time. That's what the second novel I wrote, Mistaken, is about. I have a character in the book. His name is Malik. And Malik is a Muslim. When Malik encounters his dad for the first time in years, face to face, he finds out that his dad has become a Christian. Now, this is the man who taught him how to be a Muslim. This is the man who taught him about Allah being the one true God and about Muhammad being the prophet and all of this, all of these things that make up the Islamic faith. And so it's pretty earth-shattering when Malik finds out that his dad is no longer a Muslim. Now, how can this apply to your life? I can tell you how a little bit of a way maybe it applies to me. I've had a couple of instances I can think of. One of them has to do with the issue of anger. when I was growing up, I had a bad temper. A lot of my friends could tell you I had a bad temper. It would kind of go along with the whole Hulk motif. You know, a lot of people tell me I look like Lou Ferrigno. But back then I didn't. But when I was growing up, I would get in fights. I would lose my temper. And I would just think nothing of it. I mean, I was already a Christian by the time a lot of these fights started happening. I just thought, well, I just got a bad temper. People just need to be careful around me. That kind of thing. Well, it took a little while to see some difficult situations take place. I got in trouble for some of those fights. I got in trouble with some friends. Some of my friendships became a little entangled in the temper, in the bad tempers, and I had to learn a few hard times. It took one devotion over time that kind of opened my eyes to it. And I ended up basically hitting my knees and praying that God would help me turn around. Now, to this day, I still, I have a fuse. It's a longer fuse, but it's like when it fizzles out, or actually when it reaches its end, yes, I could still explode. We have a little inside joke about that at work when I ripped off a door handle, but we'll leave that story for another day. But think about that. I thought I had life figured out. Oh, it's no big deal. And then God basically had me on my knees praying for forgiveness, praying that He would help me turn around, basically repent. So that was one time. I thought I had one thing figured out. Turns out I was wrong. I'll tell you another time where basically I made some assumptions. How many of us have made assumptions out there, thinking we've got these people figured out? Maybe we think we're on the right track in judging how somebody may act for this, or how we can help somebody with this problem or that problem. Well, I don't know how many of you guys know out there, but I used to be a PE teacher. And when I was teaching elementary PE, I'll never forget, little black boy. His name was Quintavious. I think he was in 3rd grade at the time. He was pretty big for his age, but Quintavious was an inner city kid. And this was my first year teaching at this school. And I had taught for 5 years before this at a school with little lake house kids and trailer park kids. So it was a different dynamic, different demographic of student. But I'll never forget, Quintavious looked like he was about to cold cock this girl standing in line at the water fountain, and basically she cut in front of him. And she just turned her back on him. She didn't even see the face that I saw. I saw nostrils flaring. I saw this kid. He was about to haul off and knock her out. Now, I stepped in really quick. I actually grabbed his hand in the process. I didn't do anything to the kid. I just kept him from making a big mistake. And I said, Quintavious, what are you doing? I said, do you think your dad would want you to act like that and treat a girl that way? Well, that was my mistake. And I'll never forget the look on his face. It wasn't anger. It was more like hurt. Maybe a hurt feeling that I didn't know about him. Didn't know his family situation. Whatever the case may be. He looked right at me. He said, Dad? What makes you think I got a dad? And then he just stomped off back to his little spot, his little designated spot on their running teams that I had them on. And that kind of opened my eyes. That helped me realize you shouldn't assume too much. So, going back to my novel, I wanted people to think about times in their life when they thought they had things going the right way. They thought they were in the right line of thinking, only to find out that they were wrong. So, I want everybody out there to just take a moment, see if you can find those times in your life. Reflect. one really good way of doing this is reading the Bible. Heck, if you really want to know how to live life, look in the book of Proverbs. There's a lot of wisdom in that book. And, I've even been just in my quiet times, every now and then, if I read Proverbs, I'll come across a passage and go, wow, that's profound. Maybe I need to do a little more of that. So that's where I wanted to go with this segment. Before we go, I did want to maybe have a little word of prayer to help us all put our minds at ease about those times we're mistaken. And the one person that can do that is God. So I'm just going to close this segment with a word of prayer, and then we will go to a break. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to anyone listening out there. I pray that you help us all when we think we know the way, and then we find out we were mistaken. First of all, Lord, help that humble us. Help us to realize when we are wrong, admit when we are wrong. And I pray, Lord, that you help us learn from it and grow from it. I pray all these things in your name. Amen.
Russian mobsters are dying in a federal prison, and at first it looks like it may be a case of racism and hate. But agents John Knox and Malik Sharif realize they are dealing with one elusive killer, and things are turning out to be much more than they seem. Between Malik's encounter with his dad for the first time in years, and John Knox's discoveries involving the possibility of capturing the same man who killed his former partner, the agents have more than they bargained for. Why is the killer targeting Russian mobsters? Will Malik find the spiritual awakening which it seems Knox and Malik's dad have experienced? Is there something more sinister and far deeper behind the death in the prison? Follow the two agents and meet several new characters in this second installment in the Knox Mission series as they discover murder, racism, hate, conspiracy, and even hope through it all. But just when everyone seems to think they have it all figured out, you'll see they are all mistaken.
Welcome back once again, and we are to our third segment and final segment of the show tonight. We're going to talk about my third novel in my very first trilogy. The third novel is Misled. Now, the whole idea behind the third novel is that there's a lot of bad things going on, a lot of chaotic things going on. Basically spurred on and brought about by an assassin who kind of dresses up as a Klansman. He is called the Klansman in my novel. But all of this is really being done just to lead the people into actions that they're going to regret. So that's where the title kind of comes from. It's how people are so easily misled if you know how to make them pay attention. And so it's almost about puppet strings and how those puppet strings are used to control the people, to control the actions of the people in mass. So that's what Misled is all about. And it was easy to get inspired to write that one. All you have to do is go back. You don't even have to go back 12 months. Don't even go back a whole year. And you can see how the anti-law enforcement movement in this country was escalating. And it was escalating to such a point that I think it actually hit its peak at the incidents in Dallas. What's crazy is the incident in Dallas where so many police officers got shot at one time. The way it was located in a big square or a big part of town where a lot of people were congregated. What's crazy is my novel has a very close parallel to those events. Almost like a mirror image. Not really. A little exaggerated version. And my third novel was written almost a whole year before those events happened. Yeah. Had this author a little, whacked in the head when it happened for real. So the whole idea was, what if these things were almost orchestrated, put in place intentionally? What if people somewhere along the lines, heck, if you want to come right out and say it, what if Satan, all these centuries, has really been leading people to a point where we would be so divided that it would lead to our end? And I was basically picturing America and having the same thing on a slightly smaller scale happen in America. And that's how the third novel, what's a novel? That's how the third novel came about. So what I would like to really know, if anybody out there listening wants to, please email me. Email me at fortress23@gmail.com. I'd really like to hear what some of your thoughts are on the possibilities, the potential of people being misled. I know a lot of people think this is all about politics. No, it is not all about politics. I want you to think spiritually about this too. I can think of specific eras in my life where certain friends of mine were misled. They were misled into falling into a certain kind of lifestyle. I was misled by my own urges, things that were tempting to follow my own little lifestyle. We are all sinners. And all of that sin began because Adam and Eve were misled. So this is not just politics, although it can really, we can apply it to politics. This goes way deeper than that. And it goes way back, all the way to the fall. All the way to the fall in the book of Genesis. If you've never taken the time to read that, I recommend you looking in the very first chapter of Genesis. Read about Adam and Eve. Read about how everything was so nice and in order. Basically, they lived in heaven on earth in the Garden of Eden. But all of that came to a crashing halt when Adam and Eve let that serpent tempt them to do the only thing God told them not to do. They were misled. When I was in school and I was young, I remember, I'll never forget, the first time I was offered a cigarette. And looking back now, I can see, which direction my life could have taken if I had just chosen to play along, follow the crowd, and take that first puff. I know that seems a little far-fetched to some, but I never smoked. I never drank to the point where I got drunk. I did try alcohol in college the first time. It's a funny story. The first time was because I was having to clear my throat up for a voice recital, and I needed a quick cure. And I happened to have a friend who was of drinking age. I was not yet, but he said, "Oh, I've got something for you." And I took him up on it because I was desperate, and it did the trick. But what if, especially with the addictive personality that I have, because anybody who knows me, they could tell you, once I start something, I have a hard time stopping. Food being the main issue there for me. But what if I had taken that first puff of cigarettes? What if I had gone to my first party and decided to try some beer? And what if I had acquired that taste? I think I had made the right decision. But I could have easily let myself be misled into being addicted to something. Opening the door, or opening the gateway, so to speak. You know, the old gateway drugs, cigarettes and alcohol. I could have opened that gateway and then really been led down the wrong path just by abusing those substances. So ask yourself, where in your life have you been misled? And again, I do want to hear from all of you out there, anybody listening. Send me some emails. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I could even publish them in my blog. I'd be glad to publish things in my blog posts. I want to hear from people. Again, that's Fortress23, Fortress 23 at gmail.com. Really want to hear y'all's thoughts. That's all I have tonight, but I wanted to talk about my 3 novels in my first trilogy, kind of help people see how I think, understand where I got some of the inspiration, and just talk a little bit about it. So now you know a little bit more about the Fortress, a little bit more about me, how my little wheels turn inside my head. And until next time, we'll see you next Friday here on KDUF.